So today we've drawn meditation and trauma. So interesting. And we've drawn trauma before,
Yes.
but I think it's an important one to revisit because I often get asked from people, what is trauma? And that's fair because, to be honest, I'd say maybe a decade ago, I didn't know what trauma was. I honestly had no idea what trauma was. So let's start off maybe by defining meditation, because I think there's different methodologies. People use the term meditation in so many different ways. Some people refer to yoga as meditating. Some people refer to mindfulness as meditating. And, I did some research to try to find, what is a general consensus of meditating. And it's really just quieting your mind. And however you can do that, I really don't think we should, create too many parameters around meditation, because to each their own. But it's about quieting the mind. And I remember this, I've heard so many times, when you pray, you're speaking to God. And when you're meditating, God's speaking to you. Because when you have a quiet mind, it's amazing what you actually can hear within yourself, right? So, I say I'd probably been it's probably been about 15 years that I started practicing meditation. And I did start off with mindful meditation, where you're closing your eyes, you're trying to quiet your mind, noticing thoughts that come through and just letting them go through and bring yourself back to your breathing technique. That works sometimes when you have ADHD.
Yes, it can.
It's challenging to quiet your mind and not pay attention to those thoughts. It did help me understand meditation and understand being present. And I think that's probably one of the biggest pieces of meditation. It's
bringing you back to your self-awareness. Like, I didn't really get into it until teacher's college, actually. I've always been a big visualization guy because I trained with pro athletes. We used it a lot for, see yourself where you want to be, but not like the art of sitting there and learning about meditation. So I had a full year of it. So we did mindfulness stuff where we go out in the world and have to apply some of the principles. We did a full temple day where you can't talk for 2 days for the whole day.
Yeah.
You sit in this temple, you got drums and stuff. So there's lots of different ways. Now for me, my meditation strategy that work for me is I'd like to keep it short and sweet. I could if I practice it, spend 30 minutes and but I had a friend of mine make me a 10-minute little guided meditation. She's like a psychic. And she's like, you're very empathic. You probably need to recharge. So she made me this one. And every day I would just throw it on in the morning or at night, just listen to it. And just breathing, okay, focus on your feet. And you kind of do a full body scan to kind of bring yourself back to an awareness. But there's lots of ways of going about doing it. It's not one way suits everybody. And it's something that I think most people don't really do. They talk, I'm going to meditate, do it. And then they'll try for a second and it's hard. Probably one of the hardest things that I've done, because remember the first time I got into meditation, you'd sit there and then you're thinking about 1,000 things. And then I'd fall asleep when I was meditating.
Yeah.
It's for relaxation. And I learned in my meditation course, no, actually, it should be the opposite way. He goes, when you meditate or do mindfulness practices, when you come out of that meditative state, you should be alert with more energy. So now when I meditate, I have more energy compared to be I'm going to fall asleep. So it took a paradigm shift to get there, but with practice and the right guidance, I was able to do so. And I try to tell that to more people now is pay attention to how you go about practicing your meditation strategies.
Yeah. And again, whatever works. And you're right, because when I meditate during the day, which means, and for me, it is just quieting my mind. It's taking some deep breaths and it's being present. And if that means if I close my eyes and using your senses, I think it's the best way. What are you hearing? What are you smelling? What are you feeling? And when I do it during the day and I come out of it, I am more energized. Now, when I do it before bed, it does make me, it's great. It makes me sleepy, right? And I just kind of transition into, I do sit up. Right when I meditate to define the difference between no, I'm not sleeping, I'm meditating, and then I go to bed. So then there's a transition. But I think the reason you hit something important, it's hard because when you start to quiet your mind, that's often where a lot of emotions that you haven't dealt with, and then this kind of ties into the trauma, starts to come up. And so it's hard to do that because no one wants to sit there and deal with the floodgates of trauma. And especially if you are new to the practice of quieting your mind, you're opening up the floodgates to all the emotional experiences you haven't dealt with, which usually are trauma-based. So it's the floodgates of these negative emotions and you're trying to push them down while you're trying to quiet your mind. So it's almost like meditation has to work synergistically with other methodologies. Because if you're not doing the work to heal yourself and then you're going into a state of meditation, all that junk is, you quieted your mind and now it's an opportunity for it to come up because you're unbiased, right? So now it's okay, well, here's all your stuff to deal with. And often people are I can't do meditation. I've tried. And that's the reason. It's because you start opening yourself up to the trauma that you need to heal. And many people don't want to deal with that. And I get it. You have to feel the pain in order to heal the pain. And you don't, who wants to do that, right?
How a lot of people do it. Well, I'll give someone a suggestion to people that want to start meditating, because this really helped me when I first got into it, because I was like this tough hockey guy, trainer guy. I'm like, I'm going to do this woo-woo stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the guy that ran the course, he used to get us to first start fixating on objects instead of our own mind.
Right.
Just get in focus. So one time he did this assignment, and this was hilarious to me. So he was kind of a weird dude. Like the first day he came in, he had like pink shoelaces, like this big like camel jacket on, and he had this big stuffed animal bear, probably the size of you, sitting in this chair. And he's like, "Hey, Chris, you're gonna sit beside Teddy here." I'm like, "What's with the bear?" He goes, "No, just comic relief. We just have it in the room because he's gonna meditate with us." So he uses bear to like teach us.
Okay.
Anyways, one day he comes in, he's got Timbits. All right, oh no way, not snacks. He goes, "Ever grab a Timbit?" So I'm like, "Sweet, I'm gonna get a Timbit." So we grab this Timbit, and he goes, "Okay, no one eat it." What the hell? So he's like, "Okay, for the next hour,
right,
put a little sand down in the middle of the floor. We're sat in a circle in these plastic chairs." He said, "You're going to sit there and you're going to stare at the Timbit." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "For the whole hour." So we're just staring at this Timbit for an hour straight.
Okay.
And then once the hour had passed, he says, "Now you can eat it." And we looked around the room, and like, I just threw it in the garbage. 2 other guys threw it in the garbage, and other people just ate it. And he's like, "Okay, why did you guys eat it? Why did you throw it away?" I'm like, "Well, when I was sitting there, all I was thinking about, like, I'm a health guy. Like the sugar was melting. I'm like, there's a lot of fat in this thing." My mind was running to like all the negative things associated with the Timbit and how it would feel. And he goes, "Well, that's very good. But if I gave it to you right away, would you have just eaten it?" I said, 100%. He goes, "Because your mind's shut off all the time." And everyone else, "What did you think about when you ate it?" And I was like, one girl's like, "Well, I didn't have lunch today, so I was getting very hungry and I would just fixate it." And he goes, "It's crazy to see in that 1 hour period, you guys all have a specific thing that caused you to make the final yes or no decision whether eating it. So when you tell me your mind runs and you can't focus, you just did. You're not even aware of it." So sometimes it's like you can get your pen and just focus on an object. And he's getting into the habit of doing that's like a muscle, you start strengthening it. So then when you do go quiet, you start thinking about getting to a meditative state, you can fixate on something, whether it's for me with the guided meditation of someone's voice telling me what to do, or things that pop up and I can start acknowledging them. So that really helped a lot, but definitely a tough thing to do for an hour.
Well, the first time I heard of that concept of fixating on something outside yourself was in the book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Which is like years ago, right? And so it was a rose. And I remember drawing to that whenever it was like, I need to be present right now, like fixate on the rose, the petals, the texture, all those things. And it was interesting that you said, like, when you guys sat there, because you were quiet and you were present, all those underlying thoughts, like for you, it was health. The other people, it was other things. And it was like, you started to open up your truth about your belief systems. And that's when they come through. So it's hard for people to be like, oh, squish them back down and like, don't pay attention to them. But ultimately, meditation is hard because if you haven't done that work, it's going to be challenging to keep that from yourself, right?
Everyone gives up on it right away, I think. I recommend it to some clients sometimes that are very stressed out. Like, you maybe try meditating. They're like, "Yeah, I will." And I asked them like weeks later, "No." I tried for a minute and my brain was somewhere else. It's like anything. If you went to the gym first time, you're not going to get results. You're going to have to practice it over and over again. And then when you do that, you become a very more calm person. And I remember when I worked with Buck Proctors, I always talk about that. People like people that are calm and confident. That's why you, Chris, attract a lot of people, because you bring that energy there, because you do this type of work. People that don't do that work, they're the opposite spectrum, right? Chaotic, all over the place usually, not very confident, sporadic. So he goes, those things can really do a big difference on how your body handles the world.
And you said it, you do the work, right? So you can't expect to get there without doing the work. So that kind of brings us into trauma. And again, I've had a lot of people ask me, how do you define trauma? What is trauma? And that's, again, a fair question. I didn't know what trauma was 10 years ago. People ask me like, how was your upbringing? How were your experiences? I'd be like, oh, they're great, until I started to better understand what trauma was and the underlying impact it has on a person. And the thing is, again, what meditation is, once you quiet your mind, if you haven't dealt with anything, so trauma is any time you've had an experience, and usually we have these experiences before the age of 9, and it's any time you've experienced any lower spectrum energy. So anything around pride, anything around anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, and shame. And there's like certain levels of trauma that people have identified that we specifically experience before the age of 9, and they're usually more shame, guilt, apathetic based, grief, fear. And so anytime you've had an experience where you felt these emotions, whether you're consciously aware of it or not, it gets stored in your subconscious. And then once you turn 9 years old, usually your brain waves change and you're less subconsciously susceptible But now you've been programmed and you take that trauma and you attract that trauma because for you, shame might be how you understand love and connection. It's through shame, through anger and these things. And so if you've never stopped to look at it, and I remember that was my problem when I started meditating, and that's probably when I started to identify what trauma was. All this trauma started coming up and I didn't want to look at it. So I was like, I can't meditate. Like I can't control my thoughts, right? Because it's overwhelming. You're now opening up to all these negative experiences that you've had that you've never dealt with. And that's what trauma is, having those experiences that shape and program your subconscious. And then you go out in the world and you constantly attract those, but you haven't dealt with the stuff from, the first 10 years of your life. And so meditation is a great tool to get you there, but you have to have the awareness that, hey, there's going to be some stuff that's going to come up here that I may not want to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, you got to face them head on, face your fears type of thing. I've always been doing that with myself. With everything I do, it's kind of strange. If I tell myself not to do something, I then will force myself to do it.
Right.
If I'm afraid to do something, I'll force myself to do that thing. Mm-hmm. I'm like, out of fear of heights, I've jumped out of a plane. I've stood inside of buildings. It's terrifying for me, but I forced myself to do it. One time I was scared to speak in front of people, right? Terrified. Now, it doesn't matter. Put me in front of a million people, it'll sound the same as I do now in front of the camera.
Right.
You kind of have to rip the Band-Aid off and face it head on sometimes. And the people that do that usually will break through those things. People that kind of always hit that, Bob used to always teach me, it's called a terror barrier. And that's what it is term for it. So like you get close to that trauma and you're going to handle it, no, and you go back to your comfort level. And you do it again and again and again. And eventually you get into this deep spiral of depression and starting to feel like, life sucks. And that's kind of because, you're not really willing to face what you need to face to move ahead.
And it's overwhelming. And like you said, like you faced it head on. What that means to me is you created a space for you to feel that fear, because the more you felt it, you can release it. And then you can move beyond it and then show up in the way you want it.
And most fear, I always tell people, is an acronym. False evidence appearing real. Your fears of the future, of what's going on, hasn't happened yet. So why are you giving it the power as if it did? And the same could be said about our past. A lot of times things will bad happen in our past, and then now we won't make a decision on our future because of that thing.
Yeah.
But that was the past, not now. Right? It's like in business. People say, that business failed for you, Chris. I would never do that again. Well, that's your belief, right? What if I do it again and it's better than before? Because I learned a lot in that process and figured stuff out. And I've seen people do that in life everywhere, right? Every entrepreneur that I've known that's done something phenomenal had gone through lots of failure, and then they had that 1 or 2 home runs. So if they just let that fear ruin them, they would never be able to do what they're doing.
Well, because there's that polarity, right? And we looked at this, the 12 universal laws, and the fear is at one end and you've got love at the other end, right? So if you go through, you have to feel fear in order to understand what the other emotion feels like.
Yeah.
You have to appreciate the depths of the mountain before you can appreciate the...
You can even look at like everyday relationships with people, right? You find somebody, a guy or girl you're in a relationship with, you not scared when you first start dating them?
Yeah.
You have all these ideas, like, are they going to do this person and that person to me? But you have to let go of that and allow love to happen for that thing to work.
Yeah.
So you face it every day. So where else in your life are you facing it or not facing it? It's kind of what you got to ask yourself.
And there's that famous quote that, like, if you're stuck in the past, you're in a depressive mode. If you're in the future, you're anxious. And when you're present, you're peaceful. Because you can't be anything but peaceful when you're literally present. And that's what meditation, I think, helps to do. It
brings you back to center.
Yeah, I think meditation is all about creating a sense of being present, being aware of where you're at in that moment, and avoiding transitioning yourself into the future. Because, like you said, our thoughts come in. They're not even real things that happen.
Yeah.
We attach to them. And then all of a sudden, I'm fearing something that has not happened. And if you continue to focus on that, you will attract it. And so I think meditation is a great tool to help people to start build a sense of being present, because that's something everyone can afford. Doesn't matter where you come from, what you have, you can be present at any point.
You can change it just like this. It's really simple if you can understand it. And I used to do this with my team when I was doing speaking and stuff. These other guys that would go on stage and open for me and do seminars. And a lot of the times they were very afraid to do that.
Yeah.
So I used to train them like this. I'd have a meeting with everyone. I said, okay, now who here right now, show of hands, is really confident going on stage? And everyone, no, I'm scared. Okay, perfect. Let's get rid of this fear right now. So what do I do with them is I give them just like an example. Let's just say right now we're at the Air Canada Center, Rogers Center, big stadium, sold out. We're about to go on stage to present whatever we present. On a scale of 1 to 10 right now, based on how you feel, 10 is like, I got this. 1 is like, I'm terrified, worried. And most people are like 3, 2, 4, like terrified. Yeah. Okay, ready? Same situation now. We're about to go on stage, sold out venue, but I just told you that there's a bomb underneath every person's chair, and you're the only person that knows this, and I leave. Could you go on stage and evacuate everybody? And what do you think everyone said?
Yes.
Of course. Well, wait a minute. A second ago, you're scared to talk
Right.
A minute later, it's the same environment, and yet you have a different response. You know why? The first time you were going on stage, you were so concerned they're going to think about you. It was about you.
Yep.
The second time, I realized that you're now helping them save their lives. When you go on stage, you say something that actually does do that. So you're actually doing a disservice by not doing this,
Yeah.
by having this fear,
Sharing.
and let it go. So just imagine you go on stage right now, that metaphor, and I guarantee you're going to be able to speak and help people, impact them in a positive way. And most people there were like, wow, you're right.
Yeah.
Because the fear that they had was what people expected to see or of them.
And it's
so
thought.
it's their thought. Like they don't have an expectation.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, half the people you're going to talk to today are probably not even going to listen to what you have to say. So why even care right now? You just be white noise and talking to yourself up there. So
Right.
people started laughing about it and their mood changed about the whole idea. And so it was able to help people kind of get a little bit more confidence when they're going on stage.
Well, you shifted them from fear to courage, right? You gave them the ability to see the potential, and you gave them, you kind of set that goal for them and said, hey, it's not about you, it's about what you can offer other people. And that took them out of the thoughts that they had about something that did exist to meaning and purpose, right? And so I think, again, going back to finding opportunities to do that, and if people do want to start meditating, I'd say just be forgiving with yourself and have some grace in, when your thoughts come in. And yeah, it may take time for you to do this, and that's okay. Like, pay attention to your thoughts and know that, okay, maybe I have some trauma here. Doesn't mean you have to deal with it now, but as those overwhelming thoughts come in, notice them and make note of it and say, hey, if I want to get to a place where I can truly be present, maybe I have to go back and work on these fears, work on this trauma, so that I can then move through the storm and be able to weather it next time, right? Because you can't avoid the storm sometimes. And the tools, the experience, and the things you get when you weather and you go through those emotions, and you have to feel them, right? Feel your fear, get it out of your system. Now move to courage and find a new purpose and a goal that's going to give you that meaning. I think that that's probably one of the best approaches. But I again, anyone can meditate, to each their own. If yoga is how you meditate because it quiets your mind, then yeah, that's a form of meditation. If just going for whatever it is.
For a walk, reading.
Yeah, it's really about being present. Find a way to be present. And if it's just 5 seconds of taking some deep breaths, and start there. And again, just pay attention to your trauma, because meditation is a tool to help you heal. And if you have a lot of trauma, that's okay. Take time to note it. And when you have, when you're in a place where you can start to look at it and heal those wounds and deal with those emotions, then you do that, And in the meantime, being present is always going to help everyone, because when you're in that state of peace, things flow well. Everything moves in a very harmonious way. And again, you're not in the past and you're not in the future. You're literally who you need to be and who you were meant to be. So, I hope people take this and practice meditation whatever way they'd like, and, share their experiences with meditation, because sometimes your experience is someone else's experience and people can learn from that, which is what we're doing with sharing our experiences here. So I hope people try to meditate and let us know how it works.